All right, this is Danny Zoffness, the producer of So Much Podcast featuring Matt Curran. Today we have Liz on our show. Liz is, where are you from again, Liz?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania, but I'm based in Brooklyn now.
So she's based in Brooklyn. She's a
licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist.
One thing that Liz has done that I think is really cool, and I'm just kind of learning about this now, is that she's been able to kind of like tie in the mental health stuff with the fashion, the sneakers, which was kind of what we're doing. So I asked Mac to find a guest. He found Liz, and in my opinion, this is a home run guest. So thanks for coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me.
So the first thing I want to kind of get into with you is just kind of give us your little backstory, where you're from, how you got to this point, and like your, the shortened version of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm originally from Pennsylvania, about an hour north of Philly, so on the eastern side of the state. I grew up loving basketball, which is kind of what sparked my interest in sneakers. I'm a huge Allen Iverson fan. Go Sixers, number one in the East right now. But then, just from that, I, played sports my entire life. Ultimately ended up playing basketball until my sophomore year of college. I went to college at a D3 school in Pennsylvania called Susquehanna University. Was originally a bio major, changed my major mid-college career because of my own personal experiences with mental health and going to therapy, and just really hating organic chemistry. So then took a year off after I graduated from undergrad because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my psych degree, and then decided I wanted to go back to school for social work for my master's. So that's what brought me to New York City. I went to NYU from 2014 to 2016 to that program for social work, and met my fiance in the process and kind of stuck around. So here I am in Brooklyn.
That's awesome. So one thing you mentioned that you switched up your major because your own mental health journey. So, Mac talks a lot, having Mac as part of the show and having the feature kind of host and really the carrier of the show, we talk a lot about how his experience with his own mental health journey and his own mental illnesses and imbalances and addiction is very valuable for people that listen, in the form of it becomes more relatable. It's one thing to go to a doctor who has never experienced anything personal that way. So for you, talk to us a little bit about how your mental health journey kind of, I guess really transitioned your life to where it is now.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up, I'm an only child, definitely had some helicopter parents, and, at some times I'm very grateful for that. But, at the same time, when I was really young, I first noticed struggling with my mental health when I would have to go away to basketball camps. I was really at a point where I couldn't even stay overnight without my parents having to be nearby at a hotel. I would go into panic mode, take full-on panic attacks. Couldn't figure out what the cause of it was, why it was happening. So my parents, being the very caring, loving parents they are, I was very lucky to be able to start therapy at a young age. And I think I was in 5th or 6th grade at the time. Didn't even know why I was going, what was going on. And so needless to say, that experience really didn't do anything for me. So fast forward a couple years, it's kind of still going on. I'm about a freshman in college at this point, and I'm still dealing with the same homesickness issue, panic attacks, severe anxiety, and went back to therapy. And I learned just through exposure hierarchies and understanding attachment as to some of the deep-rooted issues with anxiety, and learning what triggers me. So I was able to get it under control, and luckily after I kind of defeated this fear, it never really happened again. And then I up until high school senior year I was doing pretty well. I went to college freshman year. I was dating someone who was younger, who was still in high school at the time, and they had cheated on me and literally broke my heart. And I know it's silly to think about relationships and being cheated on and stuff like that not being a big deal compared to all these other realities that go on in people's lives, but for me it was really hurtful. So I kind of dealt with that. I didn't go back to therapy. I dealt with it on my own. But then in college I had another relationship and the same thing happened. Put me over the edge. I overdosed. I ended up in the hospital, and that was the scariest thing, was waking up and seeing my parents looking at me in shock. So that's when I went back to therapy again for the 3rd or 4th time at this point in my life, and realized that I wanted to kind of change my career path, that therapy was really helpful, and that, you know, it's something that can really make a huge impact in someone's life. So that's kind of then what pursued me to study psychology, to go to social work school, and to want to become a therapist and help other people in the same way. Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea how much of our stories mirrored each other. I think one of the things that's really important that you pointed out early on, it's something that Danny and I and Brandon talk about a lot, and that when I first got sober was one of the things that kind of invigorated me in wanting to share my story was that early experience with therapy where you were like, you know, like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I here? Kind of thing. Like I started to like make games of it, you know, where I was like, okay, what do I want to accomplish with this therapist? Not meaning what help do I want to get or what do I want to achieve? I mean, like, what story do I want to run them around with so that whenever I'm gone for 3 months, my mom shows up for like that parental check-in and the therapist says, well, he's actually seems like he's kind of got it all figured out. He's really self-aware. He's just not applying the solutions. You know, like I prided myself in being able to, like, you know, kind of give these guys, like, kind of give people the runaround, like kind of give people that were smarter and more qualified than me the runaround. And that was like, you know, something I almost kind of got high on early on. And now one of the reasons that this podcast for us is so important is like one of the things that I experienced really early on, and it's one of the main things that I took to you, like I was so taken by you with, was when I started doing these kind of like informalized AA talks with high school students. I would go in and I didn't dress up. I was wearing J's and snapbacks and my pants were falling off my ass, and I was wearing exactly what I would wear in any other day, and I didn't refrain from cussing, and I talked hyper informally, like to the point of making it about being cool and not making it about using drugs, where I was like, I'm not here to tell you guys not to get high. I'm here to tell you that you can be cool whether or not you do, and I'm here to tell you that if you do and it doesn't work out for you, that there are cool people to talk to, including therapists. And this is kind of like a magnification or growth from that, where like we want people to be able to, well, like the conversation that you had with Nick a couple days ago, like we want people to know that they can come to people like us and go, yo, this is what I'm going through, and the therapist that I'm seeing right now is a narc and I can't stand him, or he reminds me of my principal, or I'm 16 and I'm seeing another version of my mom and it drives me insane. And then I can be like, oh, I got a 32-year-old that has a resume like that, you know, that has a unrivaled resume that would love to talk to you, that, you know, that's super cool, and they walk in and see what they feel like is a big bro or a big sister that they're way more inclined to like engage with and open up with and get transparent with. And like that's been that was kind of one of the major underlying, you know, drives for this podcast, was while carefully and safely making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable by working with professionals who have done the work like you, but in formalizing the conversation enough that, you know, we can get people to reach out via platforms they're comfortable with, like an Instagram DM, and where we can say, yo, like we said it last week and talked about it a couple times on the podcast in the past, but like, I don't know how many people roll their eyes at the thought of a suicide hotline. And then whenever you have an actual conversation with them and you can tell them that like, yo, I'm literally on the other end of that call. Like when you pick up a suicide hotline call, like you might end up talking to Liz Beecroft. Like you might end up talking to a 26-year-old who's actually been there. You're not calling McGruff the crime dog or your high school career counselor, you know, right. Like you could be talking to somebody that's really fucking cool, right, and that can really like put you in a comfort zone to like actually work through something.
So on Mac's point there, for you as a young person who's actually doing the work at a professional level, in your experience so far, what is the value? Because I started doing therapy when I was like in, I don't know, like third or fourth grade, but it wasn't for myself. It was because my parents couldn't get their relationship right, so they brought me in to like be this some sort of like pawn, or like somehow include me so they could be less, you know, responsible for themselves. I don't know what the fuck, but anyway, it never felt right. It never felt authentic or real. So for you, being a young person doing this real professional work in like modern real times, what have you seen a value in making it relatable or cool? And if so, what is that value to you in your experience so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a lot of layers to this answer for me because so in my full-time 9-to-5 job, I work as a therapist for a foster care organization in Brooklyn. So in that aspect and that scope, I think it breaks down a lot of walls for kids in foster care, kids who don't trust the system, who don't trust social workers to begin with, because social workers in some capacity are also the same people who've removed them from their families. So you know, it's really cool. It's cool, but it's funny at times. It always makes me smile, you know, just thinking of some of my clients like, oh, Miss Liz, like, you got the drip on today, and stuff that they'll say to me.
Right.
I love it, but it's also part of like who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky that I have bosses and colleagues that I work with that know what I do like outside of my full-time job and are supportive and encourage me to kind of just be myself at work. So yeah, I'll walk into work like I wear hoodies, you know, sweatpants. I shouldn't be doing.
Nah, you're the GOAT, Liz. For real, you're the GOAT. I was telling Danny this when we were talking about, you know, like, oh, we want to be the cool mental health guys, like last week. And then we were like, well, hold on, we need to be careful with the word cool, because we don't want to give the impression that like we think what we like is cool, and that's a definition of cool. And then you did a Q&A on your story, and somebody said something along the lines of like, why are you so cool, or something like, just like asking you up, and the way that you handled it I thought was like spot on, where you're like I do the things that I like and that are authentic to me. And yeah, a large majority of people in and around our shared cultures like think that stuff is cool, but like what actually makes it cool is that it's just what I actually like. I don't like it because anyone else does, you know. And that's why I thought, you know, that's why I found that you were super cool, because I didn't think anyone on earth. I thought I was completely out of my mind trying to like use Hypebeast Kicks on Fire, Jordan Kaiser sneaker shots, and J-Ro fit pics to like get people to pay attention to like a bigger message. And then all of a sudden I think J-Ro was the one that put me onto you initially, and was like, yo, you gotta, because you did the what was the Don Gotti and Mauricio and those guys all got to do it. You did your React 270 you did a cultivator project, and I was like, head exploded. I read the bio and I was like, oh, she's me already. Like, what? Like, this can be done, you know? And then from then on I was like, she is a Sixers fan. She is like the Iverson thing like shines through damn near every day on your profile, like, and that's just authentic to you. And it really does work out. Like, it's not one of these fashion guys we follow on IG, or that it's in and around the cultures, that is in Fear of God when Fear of God and Yeezys are in, and is now in vintage and old shoes because old shoes are in. It's like, no, this is like, I bought brands that you've put me on specifically because I know the reasons that you think they're cool are reasons that I align with, you know?
So one thing that I'm getting from this interaction here is we're kind of talking about authenticity and being aware of self, right? So I think that in today's culture and society, having a lot of self-awareness is fucking tough. And maybe it's kind of we're in a paradigm shift maybe now with that, because the whole coronavirus, and we had to pause and like take a look at ourselves. So for you, if you can you talk about the value of self for you personally, and then also talk about the value of self-awareness maybe give some like ideas or tips for people to, you know, I think being comfortable with yourself is fucking hard no matter who you are. I don't care if you have a mental illness. I don't care if you're some rich kid that has a very good balanced life. Being self-aware and being confident in self, I think, is tough. So again, so can you talk about your own relationship with your self-awareness and your self-love, and talk about maybe some tips or tricks or advice on, you know, if you're struggling with that, what can someone do to start that journey?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, you know, I'm still a work in progress. Like, on the outside, it might have it all together, but I don't. Like, I still go to therapy weekly. That definitely helps me stay in touch with just in my own self-insight and my self-awareness. But, you know, it's even the idea of just like, when I started this whole, like, I hate the word influencer, but I don't know, content creator, whatever you want to do.
There's nothing else to call it. We have to embrace it. You're right. We hate it too.
But like, when I started that whole journey, it was really because I needed an outlet for my job. I was working for a different nonprofit at the time, doing family therapy for a juvenile justice program, and it was heavy work. And so my fiance, who's also into photography, kind of was like, you know, start posting like what you like. So I did that, and then, you know, eventually led up to the shoe. But for the longest time, what was going on was like I was not talking about mental health on my platform. I was very much trying to become like the hype bae, thinking like I had to do what everyone was seeing online and following the trends and following all the bullshit that went on. And it got to my head where I ended up back in therapy with the therapist I'm with, and she was kind of like, well, so you're a therapist and you like sneakers, why can't you just do that? And I'm like, well, it's not the normal thing in therapy world, and eventually I got over that. I just started doing it, and it was fucking terrifying. Like, it was, because I was like, in one aspect, what are therapists going to think of me? Are they going to think I'm not professional enough because I don't fit the norm? And then on the other end, my fear was in streetwear and sneakers, are these people going to think I'm corny because I'm talking about something that no one else is really talking about in this industry? So I eventually just had to like fucking swallow the pill and do it and give it a go. And luckily it worked out in my advantage, and I think not even in my advantage, but like for a lot of people, just to see that like this, it's okay to have multiple interests and care about something that's important, and also just like sneakers, and there's no like consequences for that. There's nothing that makes you a bad person or corny or whatever. Like, it's just who I am. And if I got to the point now, like over the last year, just like, if you don't like it and you don't fuck with it, that's fine. Like, and it's still something I work on every single day. Like, I still struggle with the idea of like getting upset when I see, certain people being hyped up for having the same recycled ideas being put out there in the world versus, when I'm trying to like actually send a message about mental health and what's important, and people at times maybe not giving it as much credit as it deserves. Like, it's a struggle, but I just come to accept it. And even as a therapist, I have to be self-aware, which is why I go to my own therapy, because I don't want to, do my clients wrong. Like, I need to make sure that there's no like countertransference happening that can affect the therapeutic relationship, or, like I'm not letting my own beliefs and biases like intervene with how I'm intervening in therapy and the interventions I'm delivering. So I have to be self-aware by nature of my job, but also just for my own sake. Like, I have to take care of my mental health, and part of it is just accepting who I am. I completely agree with that. You mentioned early on, you said that for you it's kind of an ever evolving thing, and I think that would you agree, or would you put out there from a professional standpoint that accepting that self-care and self-love is sort of a never-ending process is maybe a great way to start, in the sense of like, I used to think that if I went to therapy 6 times, I'd be good to go, or like if I read enough books or listened to any whatever, I could just figure it out. So, would you agree that that's a relative truth, or maybe a good place to start for someone? Acceptance factor. 100%. I think too, just like, keeping in mind, like if you were trying to go to the gym to like build muscle or lose weight, right? Like, you don't just go to the gym 3 times and have those results. Like, you have to continuously go. It's a practice. It's a routine. In the same way you build that resilience and strength and insight and awareness in your mind, it's like going to therapy every week. You don't just go when you need to go. Like, when the lows get really low, you need to go even when you're doing okay, because it's going to prepare you for the times the lows are about to hit, and how you can kind of pivot and come out of them maybe quicker or better than the last time it happened.
I picked up on something. Well, the Instagram thing is a big deal, and it's I've been through a lot of those struggles similarly, because like when I played the game with the sneakers, early on, it was before the Travis wave hit, and right at the beginning of like I kind of like lucked out as far as sneakers go. I kind of lucked out that I had been into Jordan 1s so heavily for so long that I had at a moment there, like I had the hype shit, right? Like I had the frags, and I had the shattered backboards, and I had multiple pairs, and I had the Chicago. So I had these like kind of no-brainer home run posts that like if one of my talented friends shot and I used the right hashtags, that I actually could draw a whole bunch of visibility to, getting 12, 14, 1600 likes, whatever, 100 followers in a day, that type of shit, when I was like playing the game. And it did feel really good, because a ton of people would follow for the sneaker stuff, but then some people would actually read that fucking essay of a caption that I can't stop myself from writing every time I start. And that was really like that was really cool to me. But then I internalized the whole thing, and then I put pressure on myself that like, shit, if I put too many sneaker and fashion things on my story, then I'm gonna lose mental health followers. And if I reshare too much mindful MFT today, then I'm gonna get, like, if I reshare Vienna and Connor too much, then I'm gonna lose sneaker guys. And I feel like I kind of turned a corner shortly after you did, where now I'm doing whatever fit pics or whatever with Wallabies on, knowing that damn well, like, without hashtags and without trying to catch a feature, that it's going to get whatever 400 likes, which on average is right for the amount of like regular followers I have. But I'm not going to do anything else to try to get like that clout engagement or whatever. I'm not going to do it anymore, because as much as I roll my eyes at a lot of guys like Gary Vee and these like entrepreneurial motivator guys that don't really offer any solution, like, if there's one thing that he says often that I do align with is like, for what I'm trying to do, and I don't want to project it onto you too, but what it seems like you're trying to do too is that at the end of the day, it's like, it's quality over quantity. And if 500 people love the collab that you did with Unknown, but one of them reads that caption and then goes and follows Mental Sesh, I'm such a fan of your mental health account, then it's like, yeah, I mean, you accomplished all of it. And the one person that is going and looking, the 1 or the 10 or the 20 that do actually delve in and start doing the work, like, that's still way more influence in the mental health space than a lot of people are capable of that are working within it because of that platform. So it's like, now I really do, like, unless I'm being hyper emo and like subtweeting and my fucking story gets out of hand and there's like 900 posts on it, unless I get to that point, I really don't try to reel it in anymore. I really do try to go, you know what, like, I'm not going to run this as a business account. Like, my brand, that's cool that I have a brand, but at the end of the day, like, this is still my personal account. This is still what I care about, and it still resonates. If it doesn't resonate with all the people, it still resonates with the right people, kind of thing, and I feel like that's one of the reasons that I really dig like what you do too, and it has, in being authentic, it's landed you some really, really cool stuff. Like, you've done some really fucking cool collabs, like really cool work,
So one thing that I'm picking up again from all this is that we're talking a lot about the authenticity and doing what feels right and doing what feels good and kind of following your gut. So with that in mind, where, I believe that, and I've said this before, that many, many more people who know it or not deal with mental health and deal with mental illness. And it's something that is, as we all, the three of us know, it's very undervalued as far as the importance of self-care, right? So for you, let me think my question here. My question is, for you personally and professionally, where does the passion lie as far as wanting to make mental health and mental illness a less stigmatized topic of conversation?
Me personally, it was because, like, when I was online, and part of the reason why I created Mental was, because I never found accounts that resonated with me. A lot of these mental health accounts are super pink and frilly and pastel and making mental health seem like it's all rainbows and butterflies, and like, it's not. Like, sometimes it really sucks to deal with anxiety, and it sucks to deal with depression, and these are real things that we can't just sugarcoat for content. Like, and I think for me too, like, it got to a point where I was like hanging out with other friends who were influencers and stuff, and like just seeing how they would act in real life, and like, like stressing over like what time they should post something, and like the hashtag, like the amount of like,
for sure,
anxiety that went into like just Instagram. And I'm like, yo, like, we're here at like dinner, like, get off your phone, like stuff like that. Like, that in itself is a mental health problem and a concern. So like, that's also what drives me to keep doing it, is just like seeing it firsthand how it's affected people, but also like the same people that like I would call friends are the ones that like don't resonate with that kind of frilly sugar-coated mental health content. So then, that's kind of why I created Mental Sesh. And actually Mental Sesh is going to become my private practice this year. So I started private practice last year, and I'm in the process of, doing all the back-end business things, but just to really create a space and meet, like, the idea of meeting people where they're at. Like, if you like sneakers, cool, let's combine it and show like how you can kind of merge those two worlds. Or if you like sports, cool, like, just,
I was wondering how long it was going to take before I felt attacked. My screen time is absurd. My screen time is absurd.
We'll be in a meeting, and I'll be trying to talk to Mac, and he'll like look at me, be talking, and he'll stop for me to talk, and he'll pick up his phone and get on. I'll be like, dude, you got it.
Yeah, I'm terrible with it.
So with the mental sesh account, I kind of want to learn a little bit more about you. So what? First of all, I guess how excited are you to start your private practice, and are you having any kind of like are you looking forward to things? Are you nervous about things? Talk to me a little about the start of your private practice.
Yeah, no, I started in December of last year, and I only see about like 10 clients on the side right now. So full-time 9 to 5, I'm doing my private or my nonprofit job, and then after work hours, I'm meeting with clients for private practice, and I'm working with like primarily athletes, creatives, and people within like the sneaker and just media industries, because that's really where I feel like I can make the most impact as a therapist. I'm trying to create that niche. Ideally, I really want to become a therapist for like the MBA or the MBPA. And that's, hopefully something I can actually attain in the near future. But for now, it's just like, I love private practice because these people they're paying for this service, so they are coming to it because they want to get something out of it. Whereas a lot of the work I'm doing is just engagement and trying to really break down walls. And so I don't feel like a lot of the actual therapy work gets done with some of these kids, teenagers, rightfully so. I get it. But it's nice to just like have like the two different experiences.
Although you're relatively new to the when I say new, you're a younger therapist. And I think when most people think of therapists, they think of like, at least I do think of older people. Do you find any parallels with your clients now? Do you find any parallels or anything that aligns like with athletes, creatives, or people who are not in the traditional corporate world, as far as like, are you noticing similar traits or habits or lack of habits with these kind of people?
It depends. I think some things I notice with creatives is like the idea of like romanticizing it and feeling like you need to be depressed in order to create, or you need to rely on those feelings to create. And I get that in some sense, but it's also then like, okay, like let's realistically see like where's the boundary here between those feelings becoming detrimental to your functioning versus them actually being something to help you create like amazing work. And how do you balance that, and how do you know like before it's your tipping point to do what you need to do to get better?
Right. Is it a narrative that you feel you need to add some level of depth to your work, or is it actually something that? Yeah, you're right. I think that there's definitely, with fine artists and contemporary artists all the way through, you're right. It's like, if I remove that, then like, do I have the motivation? Like, do I have the same motivation? Am I putting the same emotion into my work? That sort of thing. Like, if your mental wellness and is balanced, and if you're like emotional, if you're emotionally sound, are you going to be able to write that sad song kind of thing? You're right. It can be really important for people to like almost stay in their misery and stay in their discomfort to be able to create sometimes. I would have never thought about it like that. I thought it was really important that you pointed out about what it must feel like. You said it did feel like this, but when I think about it, it's like what it must feel like to have somebody that is going out of their way to actually get the help and actually apply it. And I have seen it on a really small scale with when I worked at my old job. I was an operational director over a large entertainment group, and I had a staff of 200. And in the restaurant and service industry, a lot of these kind of entry level positions, they are kids, and they are struggling with a whole lot, and they're not in the best situations at home, and maybe they have, whether it's baby daddy, baby mama issues, whether it's, they're working in the service industry because it's the only not dead end option that they have, where they can work their way up or work their way out. And I used to find myself in mediations and when these kids needed help, that like I was trying to find all these like really unconventional ways to try to help them when they weren't really asking for it or looking for it, right? They were just trying to figure out how to be happier or more successful at their job. And then I went in like I was fucking Dr. Phil, right? And now I see like with Brandon, who's the third piece of this podcast, that like when you have somebody that wants to actually apply the work and the challenge, that like I I do get affirmation sometimes that I don't expect, where like I'll challenge Brandon to do something, and he actually, because he wanted to know and he wanted the solution, he goes and applies it, and I actually see it work for somebody else. You know, and like that like I can't imagine like how cool that feeling has to be on a higher level and a more professional level, whenever you have people that are essentially paying you to hold them accountable. And like that's why I always recommend therapy to people, because I'm like, it's like paying for school. When you have to pay for your own school and you've decided what you want to do, you will take it more seriously. The second that I had to start paying for school for myself as an adult to go back to school for social work, like I had a 4.0. You know, I have a 3.96 right now, because it's like, it's my money, you know, and it's like what I actually want to do. And it's the same thing with therapy. It's like, it doesn't bother me at all how much I pay to see Nikki, because when Nikki tells me to try something, I don't meet her the next week and have made up feedback like I would with a fucking teacher or somebody I didn't want to see. I'm literally like, yeah, I read that whole fucking book. It changed my fucking life, you know, like every time, because I'm like, I'm investing in this. If I'm investing this much financially, I need to at least be investing that much, you know, emotionally and with the work.
Nope.
I think it's equally important to note too that like therapy, whoever your therapist is, it's a collaborative process. So like, you know, something I talk with my therapist about, which at times it even feels like it's like supervision when I have therapy sessions, is like, you know, having clients who want therapy, right? But they don't really have much to say. So you're like, so what's going on? How's your week? And they give you like the one word answer. And, you know, that might just be part of their personality, but at the same time, like, this is collaborative. So like, if you're not bringing me anything each week, like, I don't have just a magic wand that I can wave, just fix your problems. Like, you have to open up and be willing to be open-minded and vulnerable in those sessions to, you know, get any of this work done and see any progress. Because if you're just sitting there saying, okay, things are fine, like, I don't know what's going on inside your head, so I can't do much about it.
Yes, and that's kind of leads me into what I was going to ask you, is that since we all three know that no one's going to do anything until they're ready, whether it's a full commitment to get in shape, whatever it is, it's always the individual's ultimate choice. But for kind of keep going back to the solution-based idea of this, for anyone who's listening, knowing that they have to ultimately make the decision, do you have any suggestions or advice as far as like for them to begin their process of like being like, okay, maybe I could talk to someone, maybe the idea of looking deeper within myself is something important? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, my first tip is not to go on Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is not therapy. 2, my second tip would be just to really, you know, do research, like read up about it, learn some of the symptoms yourself, Google what you might be going through, and like take it with a grain of salt, because not all that information is completely accurate. And then, you know, even get some books, read some books, do some workbooks. There's a workbook on Amazon called Mind Over Mood, and it's like a CBT focused workbook that I actually use with my clients in sessions when I have to assign homework, and it's phenomenal. And I think that's a good place to start, because it's like you're in your safe space, you're doing it by yourself, you don't have to really talk about things with someone else that you don't really know. And also support groups, like, you know, just having other people there and seeing them share their experiences makes it easier for you to feel like you're not the only person going through this right now, and that, you know, other people are there sharing and being vulnerable, and it might give you some of that courage to also open up. And then, you know, if you want to eventually go into individual therapy, then go from there.
In your opinion, you know, this is one thing that maybe I just don't know the difference, because I started therapy so young, and it's just kind of always been a part of my being in my life. But in your opinion, in our culture and society, why do you think, from a professional standpoint, do you think the idea of self-care is so undervalued and underappreciated?
Because I don't know if this is the exact reason, but my opinion is that we define self-care by monetary things. So whether that be a face mask, buying a new outfit, you know, going out and treating yourself to dinner, whatever the hell.
This is in line with your pink fluffy.
Right.
This is in line with your pink fluffy accounts. Yeah, you're right. Like how self-care is defined on Instagram is like, part of self-care on Instagram is resharing a quote that you didn't read the caption under, or reading a caption that you didn't read the book about, or resharing a YouTube video that you didn't actually finish watching, and like calling it self-care while you're in the bathtub. You're right. And like when self-care is really challenging, like the actual act of proper self-care is like really challenging, right?
And it's like, you know, what I say to my clients, because a lot of my clients are like, oh, I went and got my nails done, I got my hair done, and I'm like, that's amazing, but think of it like what you did to yourself, that's all on the outside. You know, you're not challenging what's in here by any means. And I know, you know, relaxation is great and that can totally help your mind and help you kind of feel relaxed. But now let's take it a step further. What can you actually do for your mental health that, like, you know, challenges what's in here? You know, whether that be self-reflection through journaling or setting boundaries and just saying no to people, and that just overall helping, you know, your communication skills, earning respect, you know, just setting boundaries when you need to prioritize you over someone else, and, you know, being comfortable in saying no, because you know, with the way society is today, I don't think people are as comfortable saying no and turning things down because they're scared someone might be mad at them or might think poorly about them, when in reality they just need to prioritize their own self.
Another thing that we talk a lot about on this podcast, obviously, is the fashion side, right? And one thing that Mac and I have talked about is how, you know, fashion is a way of self-expression, and I think that along a mental health journey, or even just really everyday life, you know, being free or feeling free to express yourself through what you wear is important. So for you, on like more professional take, you know, like how do we? Let me think. I think that, again, people underappreciate the value of being being able to express themselves freely. So talk to me about how your particular fashion and style, you know, really does kind of like show and express who you are.
Yeah, mine definitely, you know, when I choose what I want to wear, first and foremost, it's about being comfortable. Like, I always want to feel comfortable. I don't want to like have to be pulling my pants up a million times or adjusting, whatever. But then also, like, when I actually choose what I wear, I don't really have like any intention going into it, but then what happens after the fact is I'm able to kind of look back some days, and this obviously doesn't happen every day, but I'll be like, oh, you know, I wore that and I was feeling like this on this day, and turns out like I might have been wearing like darker hues, you know, and it's interesting to see like sometimes the colors or the textures or whatever it is that I wore, you know, might have been a reflection of my mood that day. So yeah, like, it's just even shoe choice. Like, if I want to rock some like heat, you know, then I might be feeling a little confident that day. Who knows? But then there's days where I like just want to throw on Crocs and be comfortable, and, you know, just looking back and thinking like maybe that is just me needing some time to relax, or whatever it may be. So definitely reflects my mood.
Yeah, I had to go through for a long time. The way that I played out a trip to Walgreens, right, was if I don't step out as fresh as possible, this is going to be the one time that I go to Walgreens and see 5 million people that I know. And that was like, you know, that was like my actual insecurity, you know, like all these different insecurities, like combining at once, where it was like, I don't really go out socially, you know, as much in adulthood as I used to. I used to be hypersocial, and I have so much anxiety from going out and like being engaged in whatever's going on, that I would essentially just always default to wearing all black because of how bad I sweat. So then I look at these opportunities, or I look at them as opportunities now to wear what I want and be comfortable and like feel good that I threw a fit on. But it really will be something like, there was a point in time up until like 3-4 years ago where I'd be like, I'm straight up going to pick up a pizza and then going to pick up my prescriptions, and I'd be like, this is going to be the one time. I'm like, no, I can't, I gotta change my outfit like 4 times because of how I was like concerned about being perceived by the outside world. And like in the last couple years, it's entirely how I want to dress based on how I feel. And almost always right after I get out the door, I stop, I turn around, I go back in, and then I end up putting on what I actually want, even after changing like 6 outfits. And it's usually another version of a Liz Beecroft fit, which is like a different pair of sweats by a brand that I support, like somebody that I totally fuck with, you know, like, yeah, it's totally cozy swag. And it's always, and it has like, it does have an effect on my mood. I don't wear kicks so that other people see them anymore. I legitimately wear a pair so that when I look down, I love what I'm looking at, you know, and like, that's where it's, you know, like that's where it's gotten. And I used to count whether or not, oh, did I wear this too recently, that sort of stuff. Like, I used to be the same insecurities that came with focusing too much on Instagram analytics, you know, I applied to fashion, and I'd have all these like items that I own that I absolutely love that I never put on for whatever reason. And now, like, it absolutely is. It's entirely about self-expression. It's entirely about, and most of the people that I would want to see me in any of this stuff are the people that end up seeing me in it anyway, because I make sure that I have Brandon take a picture and then I tag J-Ro in it because I'm wearing uniform, you know, or I tag Jordan because I bought something off of him, or whatever it is, you know, or it's like one of our friends whose brand we support, which, by the way, I did pull the trigger on the Wallabies because of you. Yeah, I bought Brandon's actually wearing the Amore crew neck right now behind the camera, and I bought the sweats, and I did pull the trigger on the Wallabies too. They're incredible.
So Christian Gonzalez, the guy who owns that brand, is my creative director for all of my collaborations and for Mental.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up here, talk to us a little bit about your collaborations, and talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in the fashion sneaker.
Yeah, for sure.
Fashion sneaker world.
Because like that unknown collab, like, blew my mind. It's my favorite thing on earth. I reference it all the time. I'm like, this is when I know I will have made it, when I get to do this.
So yeah, I mean, like, some of the work I'm doing is working with brands, either behind the scenes consulting or doing full-blown collaborations. So started with the Nike shoe, and I think that was kind of like my breaking point, where people saw that, like, okay, this can actually be done in a way that's impactful and not just like another mental health collab that literally isn't doing too much for anyone's mental health. So did that was fun, and then went to an event in Philly, met Bobby Hundreds, connected and stayed in touch, and he was like, you know, let's do a collab for mental health last May. So we did the Hundreds Adam's Feeling bomb tee. So it was like the therapy posters you see, and it's like, how do you feel today with all those faces?
Right, yeah.
Adam bomb, and then he like designed a bunch of different faces and worked with NAMI, so all the proceeds from that collection went back to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We did like a live Q&A together, talking about mental health, and provided resources to the community. So that was fun.
Bobby and Benny are just incredible.
I know, they're phenomenal. I
read this is not a t-shirt like a Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so good. So then, yeah. October was actually when Unknown was supposed to release, but because of COVID and production timing delays, didn't come out till November. So that was dubbed the Sport of Self-Care because their tagline is the sport of fashion. And, you know, that was the first full collection we did. Christian designed everything. We kind of just talked about like what messages and stories I wanted to evoke in the collection. It was really just more about sport and the idea of mental fitness, and like taking care of your mental health, whether it be for an athlete or just anyone in general, can kind of be tied into like the way you take care of your physical health in sport. So we donated proceeds from that collection to the JED Foundation, and also provided resources. And that it was a bummer because we were actually supposed to do an event down in Miami, but because of COVID we couldn't do it. So the rollout would have been a lot better with that if COVID wasn't here. And then like working on 2 more collabs for this year. So
how incredible does it feel to be able to have an idea in your head, and whether you're doing it by yourself or in this case you're literally collabing with different people in these big brands, how incredible does it feel to have something out in the world that's tangible and real, that really is a part of you?
It's surreal. Like, for me, I have a really hard time slowing down. I'm just so busy, so I don't really ever look back and like, it's just like, all right, on to the next one. Like, right. Unknown was done, we're like, all right, on to the next collab. Like, what are we doing for this? Let's get the ideate, like the mood boards ready and ideate. So I don't really slow down, and that sucks because I don't really get to appreciate the work. But it's really cool, like when the samples start rolling in and you start seeing your stuff, and you're just like, holy shit!
I can't imagine.
Mind blowing. It's like, so I never ever in a million years would have imagined this could happen, and it's really cool to. I respect the brands that want to work. So every brand that we worked with had approached me first about doing the collaboration, and I respect that so much because it shows they really care, and they, you know, want to use like a professional in the field to have this conversation and not just jump on it as a trend, because mental health definitely is a buzzword this last year, rightfully so, but it's concerning when you see now all these like mental health streetwear brands popping up, and, you know, I genuinely want to support them, but then when I look into them, I'm like, all right, what exactly is this giving back to mental health? Is there a donation piece? Is there resources? Are you working with professionals? Is the language right? Like, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just saying it's for mental health. So that's where I think it gets really important to read between those fine lines and make sure that, like, what I'm putting my money into is actually giving back to people in that capacity, and it's not just going into that person's pocket and they use mental health as a buzzword for virtue signaling or, you know, whatever the hell marketing tactic.
So something you just said is like, it's one thing to have an account or be doing this with like kind of nothing in mind, like without solutions. So one main thing about our podcast is we're trying to make this solution based. So to wrap it up here, you know, I want you to, like, if you have anything that you like to give out as a message or something that you live by that you want to share, and also if there's any resources that you're aware of that you want to put out there for our listeners, that would be awesome. Then we'll kind of wrap it up after that.
Yeah, for sure. So my only message is to just always try and leave something better than you found it and make a positive impact. And resources, you know, I would say, obviously the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, if you're feeling any sorts of lows, it doesn't have to be suicidal, you can always call. Crisis text line is amazing. My Wellbeing is a resource that colleague Alyssa owns and runs a business, but they actually
Alyssa is the best.
Yeah, they match you with a therapist who's a good fit. So they will literally go and they will do a little questionnaire with you, and they'll find out like what symptoms you're experiencing, what type of therapy methods might be helpful, and then they'll do the pairing. So it takes a lot of that stress and anxiety out of like finding a therapist. And then Open Path Collective is also really good because it is a resource that offers sliding scale rate, like therapists who offer sliding scale rates for people who don't have insurance and, you know, are on a budget when they need to get therapy. So
that's fantastic. And then real quick, last thing, I want you to tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find your mental health site, if you have a website, and also the other thing I want you to say is anything coming up collaboratively, fashion-wise, to put out there.
Yeah. Find me on Instagram at Liz, the letter B, and then Croft, Croft. And on Mental's account is mental, mentl.sesh, SESH. And as far as collabs, you're going to have to wait and see in May.
Knew that was coming. Well, Liz, I feel like I can't thank you enough. It's said so much, but I honestly can't. I'm such a huge fan of yours. It's been incredible to watch everything that's gone on the last couple years since I started following you. I'm also have kind of a man crush on your fiance, and the two of you guys combining is about as great a power couple for me and what I'm fans of, as possibly imaginable. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
You really helped us too We'll make sure for all of our listeners, everything that Liz just said, I've been rapping with Alyssa. We want to get her on here. I really want to talk to her about her platform too. It is super cool. And it's kind of like a formalized version of a lot of things that we want to do. So be looking out for that. If anybody wants to hear more about Liz, you can ask her, or you could just DM me and I'll fangirl for a while because it's pretty much what I do anyway. But seriously, thank you so much for checking in, and everybody, we'll see you guys soon. Big love from me, Danny, Liz, and Brandon.